Hi, I'm Sherry Byrne-Haber. I'm the founder of the VMware Accessibility Program, and I'm currently a senior staff accessibility architect. And we are here today to discuss Module 5 of the ITI VPAT training, which focuses on EN 301549, the European Standard for Accessibility. There are 8 modules altogether. If you don't have a strong background in accessibility, and honestly, even if you do, we urge you to go back and read modules 1 to 4 first before you jump into module 5. So in module 5, again, specifically, we're discussing the EN 301549. Modules 1 through 4 will take you through the WCAG standards, the basics of accessibility conformance reports, section 508. And then after module 5, we talk about what makes a good ACR, what do you do after you complete the ACR, and what should ACR readers and evaluators look for when they're reviewing an ACR. So the goals here are specifically to focus on the EN 301549 criteria. There are a lot of different things that you have to look at. It's not just the HTML itself, but also documentation and other things that we'll cover. And we'll talk about what criteria apply when, and just, how to figure out what applies to you and how to complete it. So EN 301549 is accessibility requirements for ICT products and services, and it applies to the European Union, the United Kingdom, Australia, and others. So you might be asking yourself, well, what about Brexit? Well, the way European mandates work is they have to be adopted by the local countries. And the United Kingdom adopted EN 301549 as a local standard prior to Brexit. So that's why EN 301549 applies to the UK post-Brexit. Now, if you want to look at the entire standard yourself, there's a very long URL on the screen, but I'm going to tell you how I find it, which is I go to www.etsy.org. Click on the standards item on the horizontal nav bar, and then put in EO1 301549 into the search bar for the standards. And that will bring up all of the standards. The current version of the standard is 3.2.1. So 3.2.1 has more than a dozen sections. The first section is scope. The second section is references. The third section has definitions of terms. Functional performance is next. Then we get into stuff that starts to get specific to the products. We have generic requirements first. Then we have ICT with two-way voice communication. So that's going to be things like closed circuit walkie-talkies. We have ICT with video capabilities. Then we have generic hardware. We have web. We have non-web documentation. We have software, which is obviously non-web, documentation and support services, and then ICT providing relay or emergency service access. So the way the clauses work is that the criteria align with the generic clause number. So for example, if you're in clause 4, you might see something called 4.2.1, and some of these go 5 levels deep. So the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out what's in your product altogether. And that includes things like documentation that may go with the product, support services that you may provide with the product, whether your product has any hardware components at all, what kind of software or web goes with the product, and whether or not there are any third-party products that are included inside your products. Once you've done that, then you need to map that list to the EN 301549 categories to determine which criteria apply to you and how you complete it. Some criteria apply to every product all the time. So for example, clause 12 for documentation and support services, nobody just sells products by themselves. There's always documentation. There's almost always support services. So that clause is going to apply to every EN 301549 ACR VPAT that you ever fill out. The generic requirements are going to apply every time. Now that clause has some subsections that may not apply, but you definitely have to look at it for every single product. If you've got hardware components, obviously clause 8, which pertains specifically to hardware, applies. Otherwise, you can mark that not applicable. For software, you have clause 9, which is web, and clause 11, which is software. And then clauses 6, 7, 10, and 13 are very specific and don't apply to most situations, but they do apply when they're relevant. So ICT with two-way voice communication, if you're selling that, you have to complete clause 6. ICT with video capabilities, if you're selling that, you have to fill out clause 7. If you have non-web documentation, you have to fill out clause 10. And for relay and emergency service access, you have to fill out clause 13. So clause 12 is one of the ones that has to be completed all the time, documentation and support services. And the criteria break down into 12.1, which is generically documentation and support services. 12.1.1 is accessibility and compatibility features. 12.1.2 is accessible documentation. Under support services, you have 12.2.2, which is information on accessibility and compatibility features. 12.2.3, are you providing effective communication in your support services? And 12.2.4, again, accessible documentation that's being provided through support services. You have to keep in mind, WCAG will include in these cases PDF files. WCAG is not just for the web alone. Okay, for clause 5, there are a number of things that are not applicable and some things that will be. So the 4 different categories that we look at for clause 5 is hardware with closed functionality. So an example of that might be an internet-enabled smart printer. Hardware without closed functionality, software, and web. So then we look at each of the clauses. So clause 5.1, which is closed products, that only applies to closed functionality hardware. If you don't have closed functionality hardware, you can ignore 5.1 altogether and mark it as not applicable. 5.2 is activation of accessibility features. That applies to all 4 of these categories. Biometrics apply to all 4 categories, and preservation of accessibility information during conversion, 5.4, applies to all 4 categories. Now, the final 5 categories that we're talking about never apply to the web. They only apply to hardware and software. And so those 5 categories are 5.5, which is operable parts, 5.6, which is locking or toggle controls, 5.7, which is key repeat, 5.8, which has to do with double strike key acceptance, and 5.9, which is simultaneous user actions. Okay, clause 8 has 5 sub-criteria, which is for hardware: general, hardware products with speech output, stationary ICT, mechanically operable parts, and tactile indication of speech mode. So for the software, we now have clause 5 and clause 11. You have to complete the WCAG section no matter what kind of software it is, whether it's web software or non-web software, doesn't matter. You do have to fill out the WCAG section. Okay, so in the software section, we have 3 different categories. We have non-web documents, non-web software, and closed functionality software. So for bypass blocks, those sections are void. For page titles, for non-web documents, it's required. For the other 2 sections, it's void. And this is for the WCAG criteria. So bypass blocks is 2.4.1, page titles is 2.4.2, multiple ways is 2.4.5. It's void for all 3 categories. 3.1.2, which is language of parts, is required for non-web documentation, but void for the other two categories. It's void for non-web software, and it's void for closed functionality software. Consistent navigation, which is 3.2.3, and consistent identification, which is 3.2.4, are void for all three categories. And for the final three categories, the items are required for non-web documentation and non-web software. So that's parsing, which is 4.1.1, name role value, which is 4.1.2, and status message, which is 4.1.3. So if you've got non-web software or non-web documentation, those three categories are required. Under closed functionality software, parsing and name role value do not have to be met, and status messages are not applicable. Clause 11 is software, and it applies to 4 different categories of software. It applies to non-web software, it applies to command line interfaces, it applies to native mobile apps, and it applies to closed functionality software. Clause 6, remember, only applies in a specific situation where you've got ICT with two-way voice communication. Clause 7 only applies when you have ICT with video capabilities. Clause 13 only applies when you have ICT providing relay or emergency service access. So there are criteria that apply sometimes, and we have clause 4, which is a functional performance statement. And these look at things that people can do or can't do based on different senses or abilities. So we have usage without vision, usage with limited vision, usage without perception of color, usage without hearing, usage with limited hearing. So these are all under section 4.2. 4.2.6 is usage with no or limited vocal capabilities. 4.2.7 is usage with limited manipulation or strength. 4.8 is usage with limited reach. 4.9 is minimizing photosensitivity seizure triggers. 4.10 is usage with limited cognition, language, or learning. And 4.2.11 is privacy. So at the top of your ACR VPAT, you will have a section called applicable standards and guidelines. And so you will need to put yes for the section included in report when the standard and guideline listed is EN 301549. And you will want to answer yes for either A or AA, depending on which one you're doing. For Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.1, because EN 301549 is based on WCAG 2.1. And because WCAG 2.1 is inclusive of WCAG 2.0, you're also going to want to mark yes for A or AA. AAA, obviously, you'll mark yes if you've tested them, but that's less common. So typically the way it works is WCAG 2.0 is marked level A yes and level AA yes. WCAG 2.1 is marked level A yes and level AA yes. And then EN 301549, you list the actual version that you've tested against. As of this recording, that would be version 3.2.1 that was published in March of 2021, and you would mark that as yes. So when you get to the level A success criteria, you're going to want to have the 5 categories in each conformance level and in each sections of remarks and explanations when it's necessary. So you'll have the criteria will be listed under the criteria category for you. And then you've got the, for example, for the alt text, the non-text content criteria, which is 1.1.1, you'll have 2, 4, 6, 7 criteria under EN 301549 that this WCAG criteria applies to. And it's 9.1.1 for web, 10.1.1.1 for non-web documents, 11.1.1.1.1 for open functionality software, 11.1.1.1.2 for closed functionality software, 11.8.2 if you have an authoring tool, 12.1.2 for product documentation, and 12.2.4 for support documentation. So for the 5 different categories listed in conformance level, you have web, electronic documents, software, closed, and authoring tool. So if you're not an authoring tool, these would be marked not applicable all the way through the table. If you're not closed software, they will be marked not applicable all the way through the table. Most of the time, people just complete web, electronic documents, and software, and you're either going to say that you fully comply with the criteria that are listed in the column before, or you're going to say that it's partially supported or not supported, and then you're going to put the remarks and explanations in the 3rd column where you explain where are the areas that drive you to come to the conclusion that you're only partially supporting the criteria or you're not supporting it at all. For ICT with two-way voice communication, there's a special table that you have to fill out where you identify things about RTT communication, concurrent voice and text, whether you have a visually distinguishable display, programmatically determinable send and receive, speaker identification, do you have a visual indicator of audio with RTT, whether or not you have interoperability, whether or not you have RTT responsiveness, and whether or not you support caller ID. So you will have the same type of thing that you had to do with the WCAG table, except it doesn't break down into those 5 separate categories because this is only for ICT with two-way voice communication. So you just say supported, not supported, partially supported, not applicable. And anytime you have anything besides supported, you're going to need to put remarks and explanations in the 3rd column. So resources that you can use for version 3.2.1, as I mentioned, go to etsy.org, click on standards, and then put EN 301549 into the search bar, and that will bring up the standard. You'll want to make sure that you're looking at 3.2.1, which is the most recent version. And for the files for VPATs, you can go to itic.org, policy/accessibility/VPAT. Finally, if you have any questions or feedback on this training, you can send an email to info@itic.org, or you can make a voice or relay call to 202-737-8888. And we want to thank the following ITI sponsors for contributing both financially and resources to developing this training and recording the videos. And those are Hewlett-Packard, IBM, Intel, Lexmark, Oracle, and VMware. Thank you very much. And please go on and view modules 6, 7, and 8.